Okay, so now that the question pattern is out of the way, let us go back into our tracking problem. So before we do that, let's just quickly see what we have done already. Let us go back to the default view. Let me render this out. So we have managed to insert a keying node that takes care of the green screen, and to make sure that we have removed all the artifacts that were on the side and some are on the top part, we created a masking channel. We also animated that masking channel so that all those things can be removed. And just to make sure that I don't screw this up, I'm going to take off automatic keyframe recording over here. We needed that to record the mask. So for those of you who are not there in our previous class, if you go to the motion tracking and go through these steps, you'll see that the mask itself will change the shape, it will change the location, it will also change the scale depending on whatever we did to make sure that the girl stays within that mask, and everything else, like we have some artifact over here, the camera, the lights actually, not the camera. The lights or the pillar over here, they get taken out just by using the mask. So once that's done, right, we can go into the default view to see how the actual output looks like, and we can start working from there. In today's class, the focus is going to be on camera tracking, but let me do one thing really quickly. Then we can also use motion tracking to track the movement of a particular marker and then insert something else right in there. So I'll try to combine both these things together. It's just that in this particular plate that we got, this is a green screen plate where the camera moves. We're not actually having any animation for the character itself. The girl stays right there without any movement. Okay? So there is nothing to track on the girl herself. Although what I could do is I could track the buttons and then insert something else right in here. In some other clips, or if you want to record by yourself, you can have a lot of markers on your body and you can track the movement of those and then insert some foreign objects right there. Okay. So without further ado, let's get started. No, not the default view. Let us jump back into the motion tracking. And in our previous class, we worked with the mask. We're not going to do that. We're going to go into the tracker. And I'm going to delete both these trackers. I'll start fresh. I was talking about it, that you need to have trackers and how they change the objects that are closer to you. They're going to move less compared to the objects that are further away from you. They're going to move more. That's exactly how things work in real life, and I said that the effect itself is called parallax. The objects that are further away, they're going to move a lot. Okay. So right in here, we're going to detect some of the key features on the background because we're doing camera tracking. See, when we say that we're going to do camera tracking, we have to track the fixed objects in the scene because the idea is that the camera is going to move. The objects themselves, they're not going to move. Whereas when you're going to do motion tracking, the idea is that you're going to track the foreground object because that's going to move. Okay? And in most cases, it's a combination of both. So it gets more challenging that way. Now, you see that there are a lot of markers over here. On the wall, on the ceiling, okay? And they have used a darker shade compared to the green screen that we have, the wall itself. And another thing you'd notice that the symbols, they vary a bit as well. We have a cross sign over here, we have a plus sign over here, we have dots over here. So we have different kind of symbols as markers. We don't have exactly the same symbol as marker. Any clue why we do that? Why we have different symbols? Or why we have different color? These are two different questions. But what do you think? No, not to measure the distance, but to identify them separately. You see, the tracking process itself tries to match a marker going from one frame to the next frame. I was doing this in the other class. Let me try to see if we can get screencast display. No, screencast display is not available over here. Oh yeah, I noticed that in the previous class. So to track this thing, this is called a marker. And we're going to insert a tracker on top of a marker. We're going to track this marker. So Control and left click lets you place that. Now if you look into this track, you don't see anything. I mean, once you scale it up and put it right in the middle, that's when you can identify this as a marker on the scene. Okay, so there are two things. I mean, you have to track this marker in the next frame as well. So as you're going away, this box needs to move along with it, right? The way we do this tracking, after you press Control and left click, you come to this part and then start the tracking process. So right in the second frame, it lost its, in the second frame, it lost the track. So Blender will sometimes lose the track. You have to retarget that, reposition that. There was very little movement and lost the track. And let us try again, Control T. So it's going through some frames. You can see that we have crossed 100, 125, like 170, 200, well, all the way, I think, yeah. So after the second frame, there was no break. We went through all these things. Right? So this is a very simple process. And it was simple to track because this marker was very much isolated. Okay? It stayed in a confined place, and there is no other marker anywhere close to this thing. However, if you move to somewhere over here, the markers are becoming dense. Why so? Because this is further away from your eyes. The closer the objects are to your eyes, they're bigger. So if you have two markers in the same distance closer to your eye compared to further away from your eye, these two will be further apart compared to these two, which are further away from you. And that's the problem, that if you create a box like this, it's easy to jump from this one to that one. And that way, you'd imagine that both of them are markers. You'd lose the track. Okay. You will probably work with the other one and think that you're still on the same tracker, same marker rather. So if you have different sort of shapes, like a plus and a dot, then Blender will still be able to track it properly. And that's the thing. And you definitely need to make it a different tone than the color you have already. So maybe a darker shade, maybe a brighter shade, just to make sure that you can take care of them. And you can use the mask nodes as well. See, in the final render, these are becoming an issue. Let me go to the default view, and yeah, right over here there is a cross symbol. It's difficult to see right there, but let me go back to the motion tracking part. See, this cross symbol will appear there throughout the frames, because if you look at the mask, the cross is within this mask, so that doesn't get deleted. Okay, you understand what I'm saying? So what we need to do is, if you want to delete all these markers from the scene, from the final render, whatever you have within your boundary, like all these things, they're not any problem anymore, because they all got taken out by the mask itself. But even after that, there will be some markers that are left within the mask. Okay? So you have to create separate masks for those and then exclude them from the render. In the keying channel, there was an option for the garbage map, and we have to use that in conjunction with what we have. Is this very much confusing for you guys? Like, if we go back to the default view, let's see what we got. We got the girl mask, and we are inverting that, and then we are sending it to the garbage map. That's why everything outside that mask is being treated as garbage. So what I'm saying now is that there can be some additional thing that's within this thing, within this mask. But that's going to be taken out as well. Those are garbage as well. How do we deal with that? Well, it's not too difficult. You go to the motion tracking, and in here, this is the girl mask. You can create a new mask, and maybe you want to track this one, right? So how do you do that? Control left click, and then control left click, control left click, control left click, control left click, control left click. How do we close this? No, Alt C. Alt C. So that's a mask, right? So you give it a name, whatever name it is. You track the movement of it. You have to press automatic recording and make sure that this cross stays within that all the time. However, there will be a problem when you go back to the default view, because you'd see that there is only one thing that you can treat as the garbage. Right? We have created a big mask, and everything outside that mask is being treated as garbage. So how do you deal with this problem? This garbage map, because that has only one input. You see, that's where the node editor comes into handy, because you have so many other nodes. I showed you some of those mixing things. I showed you the mix node, I showed you the alpha over, I showed you the image node, and also the movie node. We also have this very nice little invert thing. So if you search through the list of nodes, you'd see that there is subtract, there is add. Okay, so even over here, since you got this is the garbage mat, I can have one additional garbage mat if I take the output of this invert and take the other mask and combine them with the add node and then send it through, then that will take care of that cross thing right over there. So for each of those parts, we will create separate mask and make sure that they are animated properly, and then add them together along with the garbage. So those will be deleted right away. Okay. So this is something I want you guys to try on your own. I'm not going to do it over here. Okay. Try to look for the add node. Try to take the invert and get all those masks, combine them, and put them in the garbage mat. Okay. So next up, let us go back into the the motion tracking one more time, because we were talking about this tracking this thing, and you can sort of imagine that I'll be tracking a lot of these markers all throughout the scene to set up the entire thing. Now, in our previous class, I was saying something along the line of tracking tracking the movement of at least 3 points on the floor, 3 points on the walls. And the reason for that, you need at least 3 points to make up a plane. Right? Say we have 4 points over here on this file. This is a plane, but 4 is a bit too much because you can bend and make it 2 planes. Okay? But if you have 3 points, there is no way to bend it to create 2 different planes. 3 is the absolute minimum to make a plane. Okay, so let us set up some of these markers, and while we are doing so, I'll talk about a few tips and tricks that you should follow while working with these things. Now, you'd notice that some of these markers are easy to track, some of them are not so easy to track. For example, this one is easy to track, this one may pose some difficulty. Okay, so let's do the easy one first. Control left click, and then maybe you're going to scale it up to make sure that this thing fits right within this part. Okay. And while we are working with this tracking system, we need to make sure that the contrast is as high as possible. Okay. This marker over here has to be quite separate from the background. And that way you're going to assist the Blender's tracking system. It's going to be easier for it to go through the frames to find this out. And that's where you have some options to play with. It has a RGB color model. Okay, and here you can see that this is predominantly green color. So if we take the red channel only, can you see this thing? Can you see the marker over here? I can, but this is barely visible on a computer screen. Definitely you're not going to see that on the projector. So instead of taking the red channel, if you take the blue channel, is this thing visible? No. But if you move on to the green channel, now this becomes clear because that's where the difference is, right? So instead of taking the entire colored picture, you can actually take the green channel only and then try to try to work over here. And this is for black and white. We don't need that. This makes the tracking process much more concrete. Say I could do it that way. Well, actually, a combination of green and blue is probably a little bit better, right? So you can track that. And this is in your hand, and when you do this thing, you can just hit the play button. It's going to track it all the way down as much as possible. So Control T is the shortcut. And we went up to frame number 160, then we lost it. If you lose the track, this is what you'll see. Okay. So what you do at that point, you press G and readjust, and then track again, Control T. So all the way we go, and that's pretty much it. Is this thing clear? So I'll try to speed up this process. Okay, we need to track a few more of these points. So let me track this one over here. And like we did before, let us track this part. Now, when we are doing this tracking thing, what Blender does, it's going to take the entire picture and compare two frames side by side to see where the marker went from one frame to the next frame. And this is going to get difficult because the images, they're pretty big, so it takes a bit of time. Now what you can do is you can limit the search area by pressing Alt S. Okay. See what happens? We have the initial area defined by a box. That's where the marker resides. And then outside that box we have another box. The outside box is your search area. You're not going to go beyond that. So if you make your search area smaller, that's going to speed up the tracking process. Since I'm using a fast enough computer, it's not too much of a big deal. It's going to work pretty fast. Well, we lost it here. A little bit of adjustment, and then we are off again. So I think I need to scale it up some more as well. See, even with a good footage, I'm having some trouble. I had to stop in some places to retarget or to retrack this entire thing. Now, one thing that is very much critical, that when you do these tracks, you got to make sure that, that you follow it through. All right. Once you get the tracking done, you have to follow the timeline to see whether, for each and every frame, they're staying in the right place. Sometimes they may jump off to somewhere else. If you have markers that are close together, it may happen. It didn't happen over here, but that doesn't mean that it cannot happen. So let me do it for this guy right here. See, this one will be a little bit problematic because it comes too close to the edge over here, and it may get lost. The tracker may get lost. So let us try and see what happens over here. Control T, we will start tracking, and here we lose it for the first time. Control T. Did I not play? Okay. All right, so in the very next frame, it got lost again. Control T, and it gets lost again. And that's the pain, really. I mean, if you have things that are too close to the edge, it's very difficult to track them through. So what I can do is, well, let me place this one first, and then we can try do it in the other way. Control T, I try again, it doesn't really go any further. So let me do it in this way, that I'll go to the very last frame. Where is it now? So that one moved quite a bit. It's up here, right? So in the very last frame, that's the location of this one. Once you place it there, you can then go left. As we have went right, we went in the forward direction. Now we can go in the backward direction and try going as much as possible. And we lose it again. So grab that, Control Shift T, Control Shift T. Okay. So this is a very slow process. For this particular marker, we are having a really tough time tracking this through. We go through 1 or 2 frames, then it stops, and then we have to retarget this thing. Okay. This is a very painful one, and sometimes in your footage you'll find some of these things that are hard to control. One thing I can take out the all right. Maybe it's not going to help too much. So right over here, maybe let me try tracking this thing from here, Control T. So that goes a little bit farther, all right, without any trouble. So what you can see, in bits and pieces, we lose this tracker over here. We don't have any such thing. When we are here till frame number, frame number 180 or something as such, we can track that. And after that, this is gone again, and down here we have some tracking information that we have to take care of manually. So what do we really do? Well, if you really need to use this as a marker, you spend that time. And that may mean that you have to go through all 216 frames manually, if need be, and make sure that the box, it stays on that thing. It's a very much tedious process for some of these things, but otherwise, for some good markers, you'll find some solid things and you can track them quite easily. This one in particular is not helping us too much. So if this is possible, I don't know if it is going to be possible, but we'd probably skip markers like these and then go with markers that are easy to track. Is this thing clear? Okay. So far, we have only tracked 1, 2, 3, and they're not on the floor or the wall exclusively. They're a mix, right? So that can be an issue, but I mean, this one is giving me too much trouble, so I'd like to avoid this for now, if that's going to be possible. So let us do the other easy ones over here. We're going to make sure that we can at least see the center of the marker right here. That's a nice clue. And then hit Control T, and it will probably be able to track it all the way through. Yeah, looks good. That's pretty solid. No problem at all. Okay. Let us try tracking this over here. Okay, so now you'd notice that we are right at the end of the whole footage, right? We had 216 frames, and we are right at the end. Now we need to go backward to the very beginning because we are at the end. And that's easy. You go left or go previous direction, or if you're into shortcuts, Control Shift T. Control T to go forward, Control Shift T to go backward. So we're tracking again, and that's also very good. We went all the way. So if you look at the wall, we don't have any problem. We got them right. And on the floor, we do have some issues, but maybe we can do something about it. We need some other markers that we can track all through the entire footage, or whatever portion of it we are going to use. We need to look for those. And as it turns out, there is probably no such marker like that on the floor, except for this one that was giving us trouble. Why? If you consider this one, this gets lost behind the girl's legs. See? That's gone. This one right here looks a good candidate, but that also gets lost over here. I was thinking about using this one or this one, but they get lost once you reach this point. Okay. So we have issues like that for many of these markers, and the ones in the background, they're not going to help as much either. See, the ones over here, they will be behind this girl, so that's a bit of an issue. These two probably we can use. Yeah, right. So these two we can use, and we will use them. One over here, one over here. Yeah, we can track them through. So the question probably that you're thinking to ask is, how many markers are we going to track? Right? Is 6 enough? Because we need 3 on the floor, 3 on the walls. Is that going to be enough? No, the answer is, if you're going to track the movement of the camera for Blender, you need at least 8. You need at least 8 trackers in the scene. So let us still take some time and do this tracking. Oh, by the way, we got 2 classes back to back, and I want you guys to work on this thing. Okay, I'll be working over here, but if you don't try it for yourself, you won't face the issues that I'm facing right now. Okay. So if you don't have this thing on your PC, please download that from the internet. It's going to take a bit of time, but do that already. We know where to download it from, right? No? What's the name of the site? Yep, Hollywood Camera Works. we go for this is the green screen plates that we're talking about. And if you scroll down, I'm using the match move test wide. So get the main HC plate. You're going to get a zip file, you unzip that, then you get all these things. Excuse me. Preview deckets match move wide. All right, so let us get back, and sorry about the interruption. Let us try tracking this one over here. Now we can hit Control T to see how far we can go. This looks pretty good. All right. So we managed to track these three. Well, this one was probably there right at the beginning, and then we can hit Control left click. And I'd probably want to reduce the search area so that we don't go on the face of this girl. And then we can track back, Control Shift T, you go backward all the way, and well, it lost it there. No big deal. Search for it again, Control Shift T. And we're right at the beginning. So one more time, we need another one. And since we're right at the beginning, we'll go in the forward direction. So Control T. And we lost it there. But we can track again. And we are at the end. Okay? So let us count. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And maybe if we can track 2 more, well, 1 more at least, then we are good to go. What it seems is that the ones on the floor, like this one, that's going to be easy to track. Okay, any one of these over here, they would be easy to track. But what would help if we can define something like a plane like this, that this is my plane, and on this we're going to construct a scene. So maybe we will run into trouble with that, but let us set up some of these markers and then we can try to solve the camera. That's what we call camera tracking. Okay, so let me go right at the beginning, and I'm going to use this one because the other one is too problematic. And if I had enough time, I'd be spinning that over here to track this thing. Okay, so hit Control T and fingers crossed. Let us see how far we go. We go all the way. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We got 8 of these markers already placed. Okay. Now, where do we go from here? You see, this is the tracking option. Okay. And you should make sure that your tracks are right. And I probably needed some more time to make sure that they're right. Then we go into the solve panel. Let me zoom it up so that you can see it better. Okay. So this is the solve panel where the most important things happen. What are the things we're going to do? We are going to mark the keyframe. We're going to give it a range. In between, the most changes happen. What is the most amount of changes? So if you run through the entire animation, the camera is moving in a steady motion, and maybe there is a bit of jerk in there. Let me try to play this thing right from the beginning. So this is sort of a slow movement over here, but if you look at this part, there is a big change. Okay. So maybe if you can identify the changes that happen from, let's say, frame number sort of 80 to 170, you'd get a good idea about the overall change for the entire footage. So we got to play through the footage and see where exactly most of the changes they occur. And why is that needed? Because it's going to build a model around it that will be marking those two keyframes, where to start and where to end. And then we're going to refine some camera properties. Now, for those of you who are into photography, you may find these things quite common. For the rest of us folks, well, these terms are not so much common. But let me bring up the menu right in here. So what they say that we can refine based on the tracking information and based on what we can solve, we can refine these parameters and try to match the actual camera. Okay. See, the cameras that we use these days, they vary a lot. Like if you're going to use your cell phone's camera, the focal length is not going to be the same for all the cameras. Okay? For some cameras, you cannot take your camera too close to your face and get a clear picture. There has to be a distance, a minimum distance you have to maintain for focusing it right. Okay? So it can be about the focal length, it can be about the aperture size of the camera, there can be many other things. Since I'm not into photography, I don't really know those things. But you can look this up. The focal length, the optical center, K1 and K2 values. You can look those up and you can try to match that as closely as possible. How do we do that? Well, first of all, you need to get some extra information about the camera itself. This is zoomed up. Let me go back. Okay. See, the technical specifications are given for the Hollywood Camera Works footages. They have told us that they're 720 pixels plates. They have an aspect ratio of 1.33 to 1. And okay, so this is about the resolution. We do have some specification about the camera somewhere. Okay, right there. These HD plates, the very first one, the HD plates are 1080 pixels and 720 pixels, shot with an HVX200. That's a key piece of information. It doesn't talk about the focal length, the optical center, but it gives us a model, HVX200. What does that tell us? It tells us we need to dig deep into this thing and search for that. Okay? So where do you go? This is the Panasonic AG HVX200, and maybe that's going to be a very close model to this one. You can go to any product review or even to the main page where they sell this product. Okay. Let me open up some of these tabs. And what I'm looking for really is a technical specification of this thing. So there's this specs section. We can visit that. And so lens aperture, optical zoom, minimum focal length, maximum focal length, all these things are listed over here. And these are crucial parameters. Okay? Because Blender has no way of knowing exactly what you shot this footage with. But when you take this footage, you have some information. If you shot it with your own cell phone, even that specification can be found out. Okay, let me try that. I mean, we already got the information over here. We need to know about the lens system. So if I'm going to use, find some information about my phone, what camera am I using over here, what I can do is I can write down the name of the phone, OnePlus 5T, camera specifications, specs, and then I'll find let's go to GSM Arena as well, maybe a bit later. Where is the camera? Well, yeah, this is not going to be enough, all right? Maybe this is enough for people who take selfies, but not for us. Okay, what megapixel camera it is, I don't need that bit. Camera focal length, let us search for that. Okay, all right, that was a better search right there. Because now I know about the camera specifications. I know the sensor size, the aperture and focal length. So this information is right here. Is this thing clear? You need all these information over here because we're going to refine these things, right? So let's say we're going to refine the focal length, optical center, K1 and K2. We are going to find all of that from tracking the movement of all these things. Okay. Now, why that matters is because here's this option. If you go to the right side, there is this option for camera, and let me zoom it up so that you can probably relate this. See, the camera presets are here. For some of the well-known camera models, you can pick it up right from here. So if it's like HVX200 and if it's listed already, you don't have to manually set them. You can just look it up from here. Camera presets. See, the iPhone ones are listed obviously, and the Samsung Galaxy S3, S4 is listed as well. GoPro is there. There's no HVX200. That sucks. But then we can probably write it by ourselves because we can write down the sensor width and pixel aspect ratio. Okay. And we sort of looked it up for Panasonic HVX200, right? The pixel aspect ratio was mentioned over here. For 720 plates, this is 1.33:1. And for 1080 plates, this is 1.5:1. Okay, so over here we're going to probably throw in 1.5 like that, and that's the aspect ratio right there. And the width of the camera, for the sensor width rather, maybe they use a different name for that. Lens aperture, focal length, zoom brand. Let me leave it like that for now. This is not the right practice. You need to know the sensor width and pixel aperture ratio before you get started. So you have to do your homework there. I didn't do that for myself, and that's a bit of an issue. Yeah. So once we have that set up, we can try solving the camera motion, right? It will take a bit of time, and it tells you a solve error in the status bar, and that's the important thing. Oh, you guys didn't get to see it. Sorry. See, here's this nice big button that says solve camera. Camera motion, we can solve for it. I'm going to click over here, and it calculated a solve error. It's a very high solve error in this entire setup. It's really very high, and it's probably not going to be too much useful. See, solve error 22 point something. Okay, this is a probabilistic model in some respect, that you're going to go from one frame to another. You're going to track the movement of these trackers, and there will be some discrepancy. You're going to take a lot of these trackers all together and try to use all of them at the same time. For example, 8 of them at the same time. They're not going to agree. How do they agree or not agree? Like, let me show you right here. We have a graph. And what's that? Well, this is very much strange. Delete curve, okay? So for one of those trackers, I had a really odd track that went way off the entire chart. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. I need one more. Let me get that in. Okay, we're going to track this one, because previously it led to a huge error right there. And I'm going to try doing it again. Control T, and this is done. So let us take all of these and try to solve the camera. And still we get an error of 22.15. So we need to bring that down, all right? I need to improve these trackers by manually noticing exactly what happened. And right in here, maybe some of these things are not in the right place. Excuse me. So if you have a huge solve error, well, right there you see a jump, right? When you do the tracking, you see that there is a bit of discrepancy, and all these discrepancies, they get added up all together. For all the trackers, If you have discrepancies, they will get added up. Okay, but since we're doing this in class, I won't have that much time to fix this. When you're doing it at home, but if you have time, you got to make sure that there is no tracking error and the solve error is as low as possible. Okay, I didn't manage to do that. And there are some more things you have to do right here. We need to set up the floor. We need to set up the wall. And these options are right here. I don't know if you can see them. Okay. So for the orientation of the entire scene, you can set up the floor, you can set up the wall, you can set up the origin, and also set the x-axis, set the scale. If you set some of these parameters, we can actually construct a scene based on all these things. Okay, let me try. Since this is way off the chart, the tracking error is too high, we are not going to get a very good result. But let me show you anyway what these things mean. So for example, when we have to select the floor, it says 3 tracks with bundles are needed to orient the floor, because you need to define the floor. So these 3 trackers are on the floor, and we can click on the floor now. It will define a plane for the floor. For the wall, we can pick 3 such points, or these 3, or anything that you feel like, and we can click on the wall, and the wall is there. Okay. Then we can set one of these points as the origin. I'd probably place that one there, and these 2, let me use these 2 to set up the scale. Okay. Now once we are done with all of that, and if you had some more options like set up the x-axis, set up the y-axis, let me try the set of the x-axis. Okay, that's set as well. And now we can set up the tracking scene. Okay, so it has set up the tracking scene, and let us go and have a quick look at what has happened over here. And in order to look at this thing, so this is what has happened. It has created a floor for us, and the camera is looking into that object. It is supposed to see the entire picture with the floor and everything set up, but it didn't work well because our error is too high. Okay. If you can bring down the error, this will actually construct the tracking scene for you. So what am I going at? Like what's the actual goal over here? Let me show you the video that I once showed over here. This one was called Track, Match, Blend 2. If you remember, there was there's this scene with ruins, and we had a foreign object as a robot, an animated one, right here. Do you guys remember this? The final product was that we have this robot coming out. See, right here, we got this robot, which wasn't there to start with. So what's really happening over here, and the part that I failed at, they're actually going through the same process. They're defining the floor, they're defining the wall, setting up the x-axis and everything. And let me show you where the magic happens. See? They will construct the floor for you, and this has lined up very nicely. Like you can see that there is an origin. There is this floor. And what we can do now, we can stretch it out. Make the floor bigger. We can construct a wall. And let me play this part. So it's pretty solid. It stays within the camera. When the camera is moving, the floor itself is also moving. That's exactly what we want. And you'll see that they're extending the floor, and also they're going to bring up a wall right in there on the side. Why is this needed? Any guess? Why do we need the floor? Why do we need the walls? Yeah, but the object can be placed on this footage, right on it. Why do we need the floor? You see, even without the floor, we could place this object right there. Why do we need this plane? Because the footage is being rendered in the background, and I have this object, this animated robot on the foreground. So why do we need the extra floor? Because in the final render, this floor is not going to be there. On the top part, you see this floor. It's not going to be there, so why construct that? Any guess? You need solid, but if you render the solid, you'd lose all these details, all the dust and everything that's on the footage. And if you do that, then this scene is going to look fake. So why do it? So you can do what? What do you want to hide? I mean, I don't really want to hide anything. See, when I place this robot over here, if you look at the top part, you see that there is some dirt over here, some part of bricks probably lying around. You want them there. Okay. Because if you clean it up, then this is going to look artificial. You don't want to do that. Yeah, well, partly. You need to have a sense of a base where this is going to stand. The plane helps for that. But even without that, you could place it. Well, not entirely. The answer is actually quite obvious, and this is too obvious because that's why we probably don't even think about it. If you look at this chair right there, the one in front of me with the bag on top, it is a part of this scene, and this is very much evident because of the shadow it casts. And that's the important thing. We need the floor to catch the shadow. If you don't have the shadow, this thing is not going to look realistic. Because if you're going to put it there, if you look at this entire scene, that the light is coming from this angle, you can see that. You can see that these shadows are being casted. So if you place a robot over here, it is supposed to cast some shadows on this side as well. Do we see the shadows of that robot right there? There has to be some shadow. Without that, it would appear that this robot is floating in the scene. It is not a part of this scene at all. Okay. That's why what we do is we bring this plane in, we catch the shadows, we don't render the plane, but we render the shadows. Okay. Do we see any of these shadows over here? Well, see, this is the render of the robot. We don't have the background. We don't have any shadows. If you look at this render right in here, this is the render of the shadow. Okay? Very subtle thing. It's not a huge deal right here, but this is very much important. If you look closely to these parts, we now have shadow casted And that's the extra bit of realism that was missing previously, and we have added that because you need to fool people. We're used to looking for these subtle details in everything that we look at. We know that when you place an object in a scene, it has to cast shadows, and if that thing is missing, then it's definitely not going to look realistic. Okay. So let us try to compare and try to figure out some of the not so good tasks, not so good renders. And let me see if I can look this up. What was it called? Um, what was the song name? Well, he's a nice guy. Can't say the same thing about his acting, though. Yeah, Nisharth Bhalabasha translates to what is love. Um, um, this is not the 3D effects one. There was one particular shot where he stops a truck. Um, ah, crap. Can't find that anywhere. Should have looked it up. Well, this is a parody, but anyone remembers what's the name of this song? No? Well, yeah, well, this is not about Jahid. I went to the cinema hall to watch this one as well. Not with Jahid, but yeah. Anyway, I'll try to post a link to the song. No, it was okay. All right, this is a very nice example. I see this already. I haven't watched this song before. Okay, yeah, right there. Um, so this is the most horrible example of the 3D effects that you can imagine. See, this is totally cut out, and you know already this is not a part of this scene. Let me run through this. Okay, when the car appeared right in the scene, you know already that this is fake. This whole scene is fake, and right here, as you look at it, this thing. Let me pause. Yeah, they have brought in the shadows and everything, but this entire background and the color tone tells you that they're not there. And the way they have casted the shadows, that's too flat. Probably if you're taking the picture from this angle, the shadows would go higher up. Or the way they're being casted. Oh, I think they left the shadows behind. Let me play this one more time. Yeah. So there's a issue with synchronization as well. Alright. So all over, like, I mean, if you do something like that, that's easy for people to notice that this is all fake. So you got to make sure that you track the movement of these characters that you have, all the background that you have, and then make sure that you cast the shadows in the right way and then render the scene. Okay. Now I couldn't do a nice job over here with the footage because I didn't do the tracking right, but otherwise we would be able to construct the entire scene. That said, let us try this out, because even without that, there are a lot of things that I have shown already, like how to remove the green screen, how to track those things, how to track the markers, how to set up a mask. So at least get that part done, and then in the meantime, I can try and fix these things as well. Okay. So what do I want from you? Download the Match Move Wide camera, the green screen plates. Set it up on your PC, like open Blender, load it up, and then start removing the green screen part at least. Okay. So this is on you now. I'll take a mini break. I'll be around, and I'll see if you get stuck. Let me know right away. I'm gonna pause this video.